So I'll just start that going as well, and then we can share that with people that can't make it tonight. So it looks like I'm coming through loud and clear. Hey, hi all. No audio here. Oh, sorry, Carl. Okay, everybody else seems to be able to hear. Not too sure what your issue might be, Carl, I'm afraid. There is some troubleshooting tips on near the chat bit, so hopefully you can use that and you'll be able to hear us soon. Okay. Although I've just realised that if you can't hear me, then you won't know what to do. Unfortunately, we'll see. We'll see if we crack on, and hopefully Carl will be able to join us. For those that don't know me, I've been working at Archery GB for the past 8 years now, and my focus has been club development and funding. So hopefully I'll take you through some of the key points around funding, and we'll see how we get on. This is the agenda for tonight. All the slides will be made available afterwards, and as I said, we'll be recording the webinar, so you'll be able to view it again. And also, I'll be available over the coming weeks via email or phone to chat to anybody with any specifics if tonight doesn't give you what you need. My details will be available at the end for those that don't have it. And as I said, feel free to pop questions into the chat box as we go along. And as I said, we've got everybody, those that have joined a little bit later, everybody else is on mute, so that we don't get that feedback and we don't get 20 people's EastEnders in the background. So the agenda we're going to look to tonight, we're just going to have a quick general overview of the sports policy and funding that's available from some of the national sources and some local ones, what the funders are actually looking for. So we'll go through that in a little bit of detail, highlight some of the specific funding opportunities that are available to sports clubs, go through some next steps that you and your club might be able to look at. And obviously, some of you sent in questions and things you were looking for funding for, so I'll highlight some of those as we go through, but also, as I said, in the chat box, if you want to add in anything you want to ask as we go along, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll try and make sure that we answer those as we go through. So, the general overview for the sports policy and funding is the first thing we'll talk about. In the lead up to the 2012 Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, the agenda was very much a sports for sports sake. So there was lots of funding out there. Lottery funding, exchequer funding, which comes straight from the Treasury, was given to governing bodies like Archery GB and clubs and other organisations to get more people into sport. And at that time, it was all about trying to get people to take part in sport at least once a week. We got the funding for talent pathways to get people progressing and competing, and ultimately it was around trying to get more medals. Councils now have less money from central government, and obviously many sports development units have been reduced or lost. Since that time, lottery sales have fallen. We've had different governments come in and go. Even Brexit is having an effect on the general policy. So we've now got a very different sports policy. We're in this what we call sport for social good phase. As you can see from the image on the screen, it's around the fact that inactivity does cost the economy quite a lot of money, and obviously it costs the NHS £1.2 billion a year. So funding is going to health projects, sports projects aimed at mental health and crime diversion, and 25% of Sport England's funding is going towards inactive people. So the the government agenda has very much changed. In terms of the sports policy, the government set out their direction with the Sporting Future, which is the image on the left, and then Sport England came out with their new strategy towards an active nation, as you can see on the right. I know not all of you will be from England. Most of the information I will talk about tonight has an England slant to it, and obviously I can't make an apology for that. I will make an apology for that, but most of my time has been spent in England, and I will draw out some of the home nation supporters available, but most of it will be Sport England, I'm afraid. So any investment that Sport England needs to make needs to link into the government's Sporting Future strategy, and the 5 outcomes on there are physical well-being, mental well-being, individual development, social and community development, and economic development. So clearly the first 2 are going to be relatively easy. Obviously archery is a sport, and you might not get hot and sweaty, but you are walking, you're pulling weight, you are being physically active. Mental well-being, well, as you know, archery is all about focus, concentration, being active, and reducing stress and anxiety and increasing confidence. So there's a lot that archery can support here, and should be easy to tie in your project to both of those 2 areas. The other 3 areas may be less of a focus when it comes to looking at different projects for funding. So individual development's more looking at employment opportunities, improved confidence and self-esteem. Social and community development is around building stronger communities, bringing people together. So there is elements there where archery can be seen as a social activity. It's hard to evidence, but hopefully you'll be able to tie in your projects to these. And this is what it's all about, so making sure that your projects are tying in with some of the national agendas. So that's the general overview in terms of sports policy. The funding is out there to be gained, but it obviously needs to be against those funders' outcomes. So what are funders looking for? So on the whole, whoever's got the money, whether it's us sometimes, as in Archery GB, whether it's a local authority or Sport England, they do want to give out funding. And it's how you can tie your activities to these objectives of these organisations. Funders give out funding based on their priorities, so why wouldn't you take the time to connect your ideas with the funders? Any project obviously needs to be realistic. Don't overpromise, but at the same time realise that a project that will deliver only small objectives probably won't be funded. So analyse what your capacity is and calculate how many extra coaching sessions you can do. How many more people will be introduced to the sport. With any funding application, whether it's short or complicated, or whether you're going for a small amount of money or a large amount of money, you probably need to pick off or tick off the big 4. So that's the need, the difference or the impact that you're going to make, delivery, and sustainability. And I'll go through each of these over the next couple of slides. So first up then is the need. Just like you do in a job interview, the person that's assessing your application doesn't know your club, doesn't know you, and is obviously trying to find the best candidate for the funding. So what is the need for your project? Why you and why your club? You have to write a convincing story. Why would they give you the funding over the baseball, the cricket, the Tiddlywinks club just down the road? So tell the funder about the problem you're trying to solve and why your project is the right response to the need that you've identified. A strong application will ideally provide evidence to back up your answer. And this evidence could be demand from potential participants, such as a waiting list. It could be a survey that you've done with your members or future members, or letters of support. And how will you achieve your aims? Is it a realistic project? How did you come to this conclusion that your project's needed? So talk to your members, talk to other sports bodies in your area, other sports clubs. Everything like this can show why your project's needed. Photos as well are a really good way of bringing projects to life. So, and as an example, this is from Valley Bowman of Huddersfield from a few years ago, and this was their toilet. Obviously, they wanted to supply better facilities for their members. So these are the words that they wrote in their application in terms of the provision of adequate toilet facilities and a room with kitchen facilities would give the club the ability to attract more people to the sport. So showing a picture of this toilet obviously did work for them. And they obviously sold it quite well to Sport England because they ended up getting Inspired Facilities grant, which was around £50,000 to £75,000 for better facilities. And if you look at the bottom of the statement, because they've asked the question to the beginners participants that didn't join, they've got a convincing argument. Here, a club on their doorstep, but it's clearly inadequate for what they're looking for and wouldn't choose to join it with the state of their facilities. So help us change this, help us by funding this project to keep more people in the sport. So their argument there was quite convincing. The next bit is about the difference or the impact that you can make. What is the end result and what will it look like? Again, this is about bringing the project to life. Reading the funding criteria is so important so that you can match up your project achievements with the right things the funder's looking for. It might be that you just say, well, more sessions means more members, qualified coaches, be specific. So 10 additional coaching sessions, so that 3 hours each equals 30 hours of coaching. This really shows what you're trying to achieve. And sense check the amount that you're asking for with the amount of people you will positively affect. In some cases, funders will be prioritising different groups of people, such as women and girls, or black and minority ethnic groups, or even the economically disadvantaged. And obviously, earlier on, we talked about inactive people. So try to match up with that. See how your project can tick off any of those. Words to use are things like improve and increase, reduce. Things not to say are replace or replacement. We hope to. We have no plans after the grant ends. We need more funding to continue. Phrases like that won't tick any boxes. So you need to really draw out what is the impact. And as I said earlier, why should they give you the money over the other clubs that in your area that will be applying? So it's all in the words. So you can see from the two statements here the difference. They're asking for the same thing. And it's probably obvious if you were a funder which one of these you would fund. It's the one on the right. But I've seen applications from clubs that are asking for funding the way it is stated on the left-hand side. So they're asking for replacing ageing beginners bows, and we hope to train up to coaches to level 1. It doesn't sound very engaging for a funder to fund. It shows that you don't know who these people are, as in who are the 2 coaches you want to train up. So we hope to find 2 coaches. And it shows that you haven't planned for replacing those beginners bows. So in the same way that you would maintain a building, or the same way that you would replace equipment in an office, it might be that you want to set some money aside, so in 5 years' time that you're replacing the bows, so you're making it a sustainable thing. And sustainability is one that we'll come on to shortly. The statement on the right includes such words as growing and additional, and you could go on to say how many hours of coaching that those 2 coaches would do, how many extra sessions, how many more extra people would be able to use those and be coached. The next bit is around delivery and how are you going to do it. Have you got the right volunteers, the right facilities, the right costs, equipment to ensure that the project will be successful? Is there anybody else that is helping you make this project happen? It could be a school, it could be other sports clubs, local authorities or businesses. Ask them for a letter stating their involvement. And have you thought of everything? If you're buying more equipment, where's going to be stored? If you're getting a facility, who's going to be turning off the lights, getting up at 2 a.m. to turn the alarm off, doing the cleaning, doing the maintenance? If your bills are going to go up, have you considered a sinking fund to replace the facility or the equipment in the future? What will you do to make your project a success? Briefly explain how you attract participants to the project, what resources you'll be able to put on the activities, and if you're working with those other organisations, explain how they will help deliver the project. It might be that you want to work with the Scouts or the Guides or a local school. The more complex your project is, the more you need to write, but you can in many cases attach supporting documents such as a project timetable or a plan of delivery that will help bring your project to life. As with any application, whoever is successful will always be limited because there is finite pots of funding. Don't expect to come back in 2 or 3 years' time and ask for the same funding again for the same project. You can, of course, go for a different project, but something I say to a lot of clubs as I go around and meet them is, does your income from your membership meet the bills and the payments that you have? Try to think, do you rely too much on beginners courses and have-a-goes? One day this may dry up. It's certainly dried up with golf, for instance. There's lots of people on waiting lists for golf clubs, and over the past few years that has dried up, and there hasn't been many people coming into golf as there used to be. If you could slowly increase your membership fees, ensuring that your members are getting good value for money, you can reinvest your beginners courses and your have-a-goes fees into the club's activities, coaches and equipment. This has worked really well for some clubs, especially those taking on a facility for the first time. There are very few, if any, funders that would support clubs asking for support or funding to fill a budget black hole. So again, how will your partners help? It will go back to your plan of delivery. Has the club got a plan for after the project has finished? And what are the project benefits? Show that the project has lasting impact on the people you're delivering it to. So that was a whistle-stop tour of the things that we want to try and draw out of an application. I'm now going to look at some of the potential funding opportunities you can go and look for. So we're going to start with revenue. So revenue is about equipment, it's about coaching courses, additional facility hire, basically anything that isn't fixed, anything that isn't nailed down to the floor. So if you did leave, you could take it with you. So from the answers that some of you put in, or the questions that you put in that you'd like to be like me to answer, on the left here is a list of things that you're looking for. So somebody put, we want to look at replacement kit, need a storage container, change all the straw bosses to damage, a marketing project, purchasing a longbow and a horsebow for beginners clubs to try. So the majority of these possibly would be eligible for a Sport England grant or similar. However, the one in orange flags up straight away because they've used the word replacement. Upgrade is okay. Additional equipment is okay, as long as you're showing that you're bringing more people into the sport. Replacement is something, especially from Sport England's point of view, that probably wouldn't be acceptable. So sources of revenue funding could be local, could be county, could be national. So from a local point of view, local authorities, county councils and councillors. In my area, which I live in Nottinghamshire, the local authority gives out grants 4 times a year for new sports projects or events. The county councillors all have a pot of money to give out to groups in their ward areas. So there are options out there locally. County or regional associations, they also can apply for funding. I see we've got a question there from John. So yeah, counties and regional associations could apply for funding, and they could coordinate a larger project across multiple clubs, for instance. But also, does your county, does your region provide grants? I know that some do. Some provide grants to talented athletes to go on trips. Others provide grants for new clubs setting up. But so do you know what your county and your regional association could do, and perhaps approach them? And then on a national level, the sports councils, and apologies, I've missed Sport Northern Ireland out on this, but Sport England, Sport Wales, Sport Scotland, Sport Northern Ireland, and other organisations for Cash for Clubs, which is another funding source. So as I said, revenue funding is for coaching courses or equipment, facility hire or judge training, targets, timing systems, anything like that that will get people into sport. At this point, I just wanted to mention a code for sports governance. Now, this is something that came out a few months ago, and it applies to all organisations in the UK that receive funding from UK Sport and Sport England. It's about protecting the value for money and maximising the effectiveness of the funding that goes to these bodies. So Archery GB meets Tier 3, and we've had discussions with regions about meeting Tier 1 and to increase the governance that basically is across the sport. Now, Tier 1 would also has just been it's just been released that Sport England now require anybody applying for funding to meet Tier 1 requirements, and these are the 7 mandatory requirements that you would have to meet. Most clubs should meet these, so it shouldn't be an issue to meet all these. The organisation is properly constituted. All of you will have a constitution that the governing body, the governing committee, meets regularly. So most of you will have regular committee meetings. Conflict of interests are recognised. When you decide who sits on your committee, you consider skills and diversity. Committee members are subject to regular election. The organisation has a bank account, 2 signatures, and annual accounts are prepared. So most clubs should meet the majority of those. And if you don't, then obviously that's something that we can help you with. So I thought I'd just mention that because the Sport England small grants have recently changed to say that anybody applying needs to meet Tier 1. Hi Abby, you just asked about university clubs. It will depend upon who applies. So it might have to be your, in terms of university clubs, it might have to be the sport team that apply, or if you've got a separate bank account and a separate constitution, then obviously the archery club could apply. But that might be something that you need to chat with the university about. So just focusing on Sport England small grants, majority of people tonight are from within England, so we'll just spend a couple of minutes on this. So you can go to Sport England and ask for anywhere between £300 and £10,000. And the focus has recently changed. So the focus is on what difference your project will make and how many more people you will get involved. It can take up to 8 weeks from the moment of applying for Sport England to make a decision, and that's actually been reduced recently from 10 weeks to 8, so that's quite good. And we've had a decent amount of clubs that have gone for this funding in the past, and we've got some applications and some wording that people have used when going to this, so we can definitely share that with you if that's something you're looking for. What they won't fund is activity that's already happening, activity that only benefits an individual. Replacement equipment, there's that word replacement again. So replacement equipment is a no-no. Fixed capital costs, so that's something, and building refurbishment projects, so that's something more for Community Asset Fund, and we'll mention that shortly. And you could apply to Sport England every 12 months for £10,000, but you would obviously need to make sure that the project is different from the previous one, and also you'd have to make sure that you obviously tick all the boxes, and look, on the left hand side there's the priorities, so you've got to meet at least one or more of those aims. So getting inactive people to become active, developing lasting sporting habits, so that's obviously something at a national level we're trying to do. We're trying to get more people to retain archery membership within clubs. Develop more diverse volunteers, engender more positive attitudes amongst young people. Projects working with mixed age groups may be still considered as long as there's a focus on people aged 14 or over. In terms of the home nations, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but there is funding out there. So Sport Wales is slightly different. They have a community chest of up to £1,500, and you can get that every 12 months. And that's around increasing participation and improving standards. That scheme is run in partnership with local authorities, so it'll be advised that you contact your local authority if you are in Wales. And then with Sport Scotland and Sport Northern Ireland, there is the National Lottery Awards for All, and I'll come on to that first in a second. That's where they point people towards if they're looking for revenue funding. So if you've not actually been onto Sport England's website before, you can get both of these documents there. They've got a Sport England Small Grants Guide, and I would recommend you go and have a look at that. And I would recommend you look at the Code for Sports Governance to make sure that you meet Tier 1 as well if you're going to go down that route. The National Lottery Awards for All, again, it provides grants of £300 to £10,000, and it has 3 funding priorities, and you need to meet at least one of those. It is available in all home nations, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. Sport Scotland definitely refer you to the Awards for All if you're going to apply for the revenue funding. Previously, Sport Awards for All would point you towards Sport England. However, I have noticed on their website they don't have that stipulation. So it might be that you can apply for both, but obviously you can't apply for the same thing for the same project. That's called double funding. Separate parts of the project would be fine, but not the same project. So there's a website there, biglotteryfund.org.uk. And that would be able to go there and you'll be able to find out the criteria for Awards for All and how to apply. But the priorities are there about bringing people together, building stronger relationships, improving the places and the spaces that matter, and enabling more people to fulfill their potential, to address issues at the earliest stage. In England, there are 43 county sports partnerships. So if your club is based in England, then I would suggest, and if you haven't had a chat with your county sports partnership before, then I would suggest that you go and have a chat with them. Their focus has changed as well, as I said at the beginning of the presentation. But the county sports partnerships are conduits for some of Sport England's funding. Their funding support and their club support still remain. So many archery clubs that I've worked with have had very fruitful partnerships with CSPs that have led to funding opportunities, training opportunities, and much more. They often have a funding officer, or they have funding information available on their website. So again, there's a link there, cspnetwork.org, and you can find your CSP, find which area you live in the country, and then it will tell you the website for your CSP, and you can find out the contact details for the officers working there. There are no CSPs in Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland. In Scotland, there are local sports councils that may be able to help. And in Wales, Northern Ireland, I'm not aware of any similar organisations, but I would suggest that the local authorities are probably your first port of call. And as I mentioned earlier, with the community chest that Sport Wales has, that's delivered through local authorities, so it's a good place to start. There are plenty of non-sporting organisations that can support volunteer organisations, and obviously that includes archery clubs. Two of them I wanted to highlight here. Community foundations. There are 46 community foundations in the UK, and between them all they made £77 million worth of grants last year, and the average size was nearly £3,500. So this is a national network across the country. They help people and organisations invest in local communities where it is needed and where it will make the most impact. So again, if you go to the website, you can find your local community foundation, and they have grants, they have people that can help. On the whole, they help local volunteer organisations. They don't have much to do with sport, but a lot of them are starting to have more to do with sport, so it's a good time to get involved with them and find out what the grants are available in your area. The other organisation to look at is the Councils for Voluntary Service. Again, this is a national organisation, similar to community foundations, but they run a central national funding website, which is fundingcentral.org.uk. It is free to small organisations, but they also, the Councils for Voluntary Services also have local district or borough-based organisations with knowledgeable staff that help volunteer groups. So with funding, whether it's changing your structure or whatever it might be, they could help you at a local level. Just plug in our own handy guide to funding. If you haven't been on our website and found the handy guides, there's about 16, 17 handy guides that we have on there. And one of them is around sports funding. And I try to update this every 3 to 6 months. The last time I did update it is May, so some of it is out of date. But it also has in there top tips for successful applications. It has some fundraising ideas, and it has many national, regional funding opportunities. So there's around 30, 40 pages worth of information. So if you haven't been on there, that's a good place to start. And you can start working out which of the funding would be eligible for your project. And it also includes revenue funding, which we've just talked about, and also facility or capital funding. And that's the bit I'm going to talk about next. And it comes as no surprise that many of you have asked about facility funding. So I've dedicated the next few slides to this area. Again, it's quite brief. I realise I'm talking quite fast, but please feel free to contact me afterwards if you want to explore this further. This picture is of Ayr Valley Archers. I visited a few months ago. They received £65,000 from Sport England, and that's Danny Brown with the back there on the left, and they also raised £12,000 themselves to build a lovely clubhouse which is behind all those people there. And they were one of 15 clubs that received lottery funding from Sport England in their Inspired Facilities grant. So again, when we look to the questions that you asked, these are on the left here. These are the things that people asked about. Replacement roof on our indoor range, development of shipping containers into a club facility, building an indoor range, development of a new clubhouse, drainage, clubhouse purchase again, buying facilities, and the last one, purchase of land. So capital funding is about bricks and mortar, things that you wouldn't be able to take with you if you moved venues. The items in blue may be eligible for funding from such schemes as Sport England's Community Asset Fund. You would need a lease or own your own land. The bottom one, highlighted in orange, is a bit more problematic. Funding to buy land is very difficult. It's not impossible, but it is very difficult compared to finding funding for an indoor range or a clubhouse. So again, we'll start with Sport England. So they have the Community Asset Fund, which is it used to be called the Inspired Facilities Grant, and that's where, as I said earlier, 15 of our clubs received that funding in the last few years. The Community Asset Fund is slightly different. So there are two levels, as you can see from the first level, £1,000 to £15,000, small scale investment. So emergency works due to storm flood damage, or something stop people from being active. So you need that investment to get back up and running. And then medium scale investments between £15,000 and £50,000 for more substantial changes. So that might be taking over a unused sports facility or one that may be under threat of closure, bringing back a building into use, or making improvements to the space so it can be used for sport, expanding or improving the sporting experience already on offer. So that might be changing rooms, new toilets, heating systems, and as we said, responding to an emergency or unexpected event that's stopped people from being active. There is another level in terms of large-scale investments, but this is probably more suitable for schools, leisure centres, local authorities. So these first two levels, the small scale and the medium scale, are probably the right ones for archery clubs at the moment. Sport Scotland has a sports facilities fund where you can apply for up to £10,000, and Sport Wales has a development fund for up to £25,000. Interestingly, with Sport Wales, that includes the purchase of land or the rights to land to develop activity. So unfortunately, Sport England don't do that, but Sport Wales does. Some of the other sources of funding are landfill tax. So there is this comes under lots of different names. So it might be the Viola Environmental Trust, Suez Communities, Wren, Groundworks. You may have heard of some of these. So for every ton of waste that goes into a landfill site, there's a tax on that which offsets some of the negative impacts of living in the vicinity of a landfill site. So, excuse me, you may have to be within 5 or 10 mile radius of a landfill site. There are many different operators. I've just highlighted the BIFA Awards one here. Not necessarily for a sporting related project, but building works or improvements to clubhouse facilities, which then demonstrate multi-use for the wider community. So not just the sole use of the sports club. So that could be of interest to some of you. The project sites within 5 miles of a BIFA site, or 10 miles of an active landfill site. the site is owned by the applicant, or you've got a lease for more than 10 years, and the project cost is less than £200,000. So that's just an example of one area. Obviously, there are many more that provide landfill tax funding. And again, you can add different funding together. So you could get funding from Sport England, and you could get funding from BIFA Awards or REN, and you could add the two together. Again, like I said earlier, as long as they're not paying for the same thing, that would be absolutely fine. As I said earlier, the purchasing a land is very difficult. Clubs that have gone out and got facility funding have done so because they have either have the land or they've got a lease, or the owner of the land has been the applicant's funding. As I said, it's not impossible, and there are a small number of ways doing it. Obviously, it's harder depending on the where you live. So for those that are interested in this area in terms of buying land, obviously I can't go into too much detail tonight, but I'm happy to discuss this with you individually, and just feel free to get in contact with me. We can discuss it further. As I said a few slides ago, facilities obviously remains a top issue for our clubs, for you guys. So in 2019, and I'm hoping early 2019, we'll be running a facility workshop that's going to look at the planning issues, funding, design of clubhouses and ranges. As we note there, haven't got a specific date just yet, but if you keep an eye on their website and social media, we'll get that out as soon as possible. And if you're interested in that, just send me an email, and we'll add you to the interest list. And as soon as we've got something in place, we'll let you know when that is. Okay, so what are the next steps? Where do you go from here? The first thing that I would ask you to do is to think about developing a plan. If you've got one, then great. How old is it? Does it need updating? Does it need refreshing? Does it meet the needs of the club right now? If you haven't got a plan, why do you need one? Well, it will help you identify what your priorities are. You can share it, you can celebrate it, and it stops you from stumbling from one issue to the next. So it may be just as simple as the table here. I just wrote this up earlier today. 3 areas that a fictitious club might be interested in doing. So what are you trying to achieve? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it by? Who's going to do it? And what's the cost? So when you're developing this plan, ask yourself a few questions which are on the left here. Where have you come from? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? How will you get there? And how will you know you've achieved your targets? So for instance, the first line is develop the club and gain recognition. So as I oversee the On Target program, I've written set on target, contact AGB for some advice and guidance, register and make use of the resources of offer. Do that by January, by the development officer, and the cost to do that. Replace aging equipment, offer more coaching, and as you can see from the lines there, it goes into further detail in terms of how are you going to do that, who's going to do it, when you're going to do it, and the cost. Even if it was just 3 lines on one piece of paper, that is at least a development plan that you can share with other people. You can share it with us nationally so that we can see what you're trying to achieve. You can share it with a local sports development officer, or you can share it with a funder. Keep it simple and review it regularly. The next steps after that is to download the handy guide, which I've already referenced, sign up to some of the funding websites we've talked about, and identify your key priorities and which funding streams might be able to support these. Obviously, after all of this, if you're still unsure where to go, then please come to me and we can have a conversation about your circumstances and how we can help you move forward. I've referenced some of these people previously tonight, so your county sports partnership, your local authority sports development officer. Ask in your county which clubs have received funding. Could you get their applications and have a look how they did it? Sport England, Sport Scotland and Sport Wales have separate websites with lots of information to help clubs develop. So Sport England is called Club Matters, and the website's there. That's about club finances and funding. Sport Scotland has help for clubs, and Sport Wales has club solutions. I don't think there's any restrictions for anybody to sign up to these things. So I know that some people outside of England have signed up to Sport England Club Matters. It's a wealth of information. It's all free. And if you've not been on there, then I would go there. There's marketing information, there's governance structures, there is a lot of information that's available. And obviously with the top one, with Archery with myself, we can help broker discussions with some clubs that have already trying to achieve what you're trying to achieve. So whether it's copies of application forms, sharing the success with others, we always want to show clubs in the magazine and on the website how they've got funding, where they've got funding from. And also a key point here is that funders sometimes contact us and ask us about funding applications. So if you at least tell us that you're applying, some cases put us down as a reference or a referee, and give us the information about what you're applying for, at least we know about it then. It's slightly embarrassing when a funder comes to Archery GB and asks us, do you know anything about this club? Do you know anything about this application? And sometimes we have to say no. So that's 50 minutes of me talking, and we getting to the end now. So there was a couple of questions that came through that we haven't answered when people signed up. One of them was around gaining funding without having a specific project to go for. Well, the short answer is no. Hopefully you've seen from the presentation that the funding available is often alongside strict criteria. This person specifically mentioned that they have a long-term idea of building a new club venue. You can't get funding and then store it away. It has to be for a specific project that meets the needs of the funder. A better way of getting funding in that case would be to raise funds through general fundraising, raffles, race nights, and other such events. Another question that someone asked us is seeking local funding more fruitful than national funding? Well, this would really depend on your locality. As I mentioned earlier, in my area, councillors and district councils have funding pots for events and training up coaches. In some areas, they don't have any because their budgets have been cut. National funding opportunities will tend to be longer. The application process will tend to be longer and more rigorous. So really, when you look at your project, it's about trying to find the best fit. It may be that you've got a project to train up coaches, get some more equipment and get more people into your club, but you have to break it down into certain sections. So the equipment cost might come from your local authority, the training up coaches might come from Sport England, and the other sections from other different parts. So as long as you're not crossing the boundaries and doing that double funding, you should be able to get all the funding for that project from multiple sources. So just looking at the questions on the chat, are you able to email this presentation? Absolutely. Everyone will get a copy of the presentation, a link to the video as well. and obviously my contact details to follow up with me. So that's absolutely fine. You'll probably get that tomorrow. If not tomorrow, it will definitely be by the end of the week. John's asked the question here: is it better to apply for more than you expect to get funding for? I would probably say that's a no. In some cases, the funders won't provide you with the funding unless you've got 3 quotes, or you've got a very detailed development plan and a project plan. Absolutely, you can build contingencies in, but you would possibly have to show this, depending on what your project was. If you underspent, it may be better sometimes to give that funding back to the funder. It may be that they come to you in a year's time or 6 months' time and say, oh, you were good with us, you gave us the money back, do you want to apply for any more? Or in some cases, they might turn around and say, no, that's fine, we've allocated you money, you can keep that. But I would suggest that you wouldn't apply for more funding than you actually needed. Phil, you've asked a question around specific funding streams to enable better access for disabled groups. Yes, so if you are England based, then Sport England would definitely be interested in that. And to be honest, most funders would, because that would be seen to increasing the opportunities available to more people. So I'm sure there probably is some specific schemes just for that project, just for disabled group. I'm not aware of any at the moment, but that would be a case of we could do a little funding search for where you are. So if you provided your postcode for your club, we can do a little funding search in your area. But definitely the Sport England small grant scheme would be something that would go for that. Hi Christine, you've said, is it possible to get funding to help out with venue hire where usual premises are out of operation for redevelopment over a few years? Okay, so if you were hiring an additional sports hall to get more people shooting or more people active, then the answer is possibly yes. If your original venue's out of action, and I think the question would be is, what are you doing with the money that you would pay for the original venue hire? So if you're saying that the new venue would be more expensive, then you could possibly look for funding for that, but I suspect it would be difficult unless you were getting more people involved in the sport. Let's just see whether, just bear with me a second. Yeah, I think it would be. Hi, Christine, are you there?
Hi.
Hello. Hello. Right. So, do you mean that the new venue would be more expensive, or are you just looking for? But explain the situation.
So what had happened is we were just a community-based archery club linked to a well-being program at a local community baths. This is now closed and we can't use the space to shoot, and it's also shut down the beginners program. So we're now looking to try and establish, a fully formed club and find premises to shoot, etc. So we're essentially starting from the beginning, really.
Okay.
I was just wondering whether we might get help with, you know, some of the initial things that are quite difficult to deal with, such as facilities hire, etc.
Okay, right. I think it possibly is. It may be something that we explore offline.
Okay.
So if you want to drop me an email with your contact details and stuff, and perhaps we have a chat at a later date. What you could do is explain to a funder that what you did initially was a kind of a pilot, and then you want to kind of take it forward and establish it further. So that might be the way to do it. But yeah, if you drop me a line, we'll pick that up and see what we can do to help. Is that okay?
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay. Denise, you've asked a similar question there. Would it be possible to get funding to pay rent at a leisure centre, which is very expensive? If it's an additional hire, then possibly you could say, right, we want to hire at this leisure centre, which is adding to the amount of people that can shoot in a week, and we're getting more people in, then possibly. If you're saying the leisure centre is very expensive, we can't afford it, and they've put put their fees up and stuff like that, someone like Sport England would possibly say, well, you should be able to pay from that from your membership fees, and therefore you should put your membership fees up. So it's a bit of a difficult situation, that one. Again, if you want to explain it offline, then we can do that. Abby, you've asked if there's funding for competition fees and travel to competitions, or more equipment utilities based. That's an interesting one, actually. I think previously Sport England did give out funding for competition entries and travel to competitions, but I suppose it would then we'd have to look at why you would need that and what is it doing for Sport England's priorities. So if it is about people that don't take part in competitions and helping them take part in competitions by initially funding their entry fees and initially paying for some travelling costs, then you could work up a decent application around that. If it's about people who are already taking part and subsidising them, then I would say you probably not. Okay, we're probably at the end. I've taken up an hour of your time, and thank you for the comments that are coming through saying a good session. I've rattled through it, so feel free to get in touch and ask me any specifics, and hopefully we can help you. Just one final question there, Leyland Archery Club. Would funding be available to subsidise fees and equipment for low-income families? That's quite a good one, actually. That I think that possibly would be something that Sport England would be interested in. They want to get inactive people active. They want to get people in lower socio-economic groups active, and they want to get families active. So if that was your project and you went to them to get equipment and fees, again, I think fees would be an initial thing. They would hope that the club would be able to do something long term. Now, I know it's not just club fees, it's then county and regional archery GB fees. It may be something that Sport England would want to explore. But again, you would have to make sure you meet their criteria and are ticking their boxes. And in all of these applications, if you put an application together, feel free to send it to us. We can review it, we can proofread it, we can give you letters of support, etc. We can be that referee. We really do want to help clubs develop and improve. So any of that you want to have a chat with me about, or you want us to look at a grant application for you, then we're very willing to do that. Yeah, hi Emma. Yeah, good starting point. Yeah, in an hour we've only obviously been able to scratch the surface. I hope that you know this is something that will enable you to find what you need. But as I said, we're here to help, so please do get in touch with us. And on that basis, here's my contact details for those that don't have it. My email address and my telephone number. Get in touch with me. Not tonight. I really need a drink after. I feel like I'm getting a bit hoarse now. But I'm in the office tomorrow. I'm working for the rest of the week. Get in touch with me and let's arrange a separate phone call or an email chat or whatever it is, and we can help you get some funding to develop your clubs. And then I think this is the final slide. Thank you. I'll send out a link to the slides and the recording. I'm also going to ask you to complete a very short survey on how you felt the webinar went. We do want to run more of these in the future. This is my third this year. I've done 2 funding ones and 1 on the on-target specialisms. And obviously it's much easier for people to spend an hour online and travelling 3 hours down the road for a seminar when it can be short and quick like this. So thanks very much for your comments. I hope you've enjoyed tonight. I hope it's been useful. Sounds like it has been, and feel free to get back in touch at any stage. I will leave my contact details back, so if anybody didn't get a chance to write them down, you've got them there. And the final thing is to say good night. Thank you very much for taking part. And I know it's a little bit early. It's only the 4th of December, but Merry Christmas, Happy New Year and all that. And get in touch when you want some help. Okay, thanks everybody. Good night.